Let's.
I would
Oh god, oh my fucking god! I was laughing throughout a good portion of that. Where did I start?
Like, you mean unintentionally? Like, it wasn't like, that's a joke and I'm going to laugh?
No.
She was laughing throughout the entire subplot thing, right? You know, like, why are all these people in this office, like, working together? Why are they also married? And, you know, like, what the fuck?
Is that? The subplot reflected the overall plot, but I actually started laughing my ass off when they mentioned Meninists.
Yeah.
That's like saying a fucking internet meme has a movement, a political movement.
Okay,
like,
but
those cats, you know, like they're all for the equal rights for cats.
Okay, but okay, here's the thing, and here's why I didn't hate this. Okay. I did not hate this because they brought up a whole bunch of issues, right? And they brought them up in a serious way. Men can be victims of spousal abuse. In fact, everybody is supposed to, the audience is supposed to realize that both the ex-husband and the new guy, right, are abuse victims. They're supposed to understand that. They're supposed to see, and this is why she was such an unrealistic person when she was throwing her new boyfriend under the bus at the end, right? Is that the audience is supposed to understand that she's the actual murderer, right? And she is not only willing to beat her husband and willing to beat her new boyfriend, but also willing to throw him under the bus to get out of paying the consequences for her own frickin' actions. They're supposed to see her as a violent woman. It's supposed to be, and they closed it off without her actually being the one to confess or them finding out, no, it really was her, right? That the reason why they were able to do that, and everybody still knows it was her, is because she was so unrealistic in terms of not acting like your typical woman who bursts into tears and, oh, it was so scary, and the whole bit, right? Okay? He just beat him and I couldn't stop him, right? They made her unrealistic in that scene so that everybody in the audience knows she's the actual murderer. They talked about women having a propensity for violence. They talked about women not facing the same consequences for their violence. The fact that Brandon was like super strong, super woman, broke the guy's jaw, very unrealistic, but when you actually, if she just slapped him, right, or something, or broken her hand and left a bruise on him or something like that, then there would be a way to justify the fact that she's not going to get any serious punishment, right? Whereas a man would be in prison. No, she broke the guy's jaw, right? So she's not facing any punishment. She's aware of this, right? She comes right out and says it. She talks about it with the other guy, the freaking Hispanic guy, right? So, I mean, like, they talked about a whole fucking slew of these issues, right? Whole fucking slew of them. And they even showed that bitch feminist at the rally, you know, we're not here to arrest you, and her using them to try to, lying, to try to rile up the fucking crowd, right? I mean, this was a mixed bag, okay? Like, I am not June Cleaver, none of us are, right? I don't think any single female MRA would ever wear that pink sweater, right? Or let our husbands talk to us that way, or even be with a man who would have those attitudes about women, right? And this is not a reflection of what the movement is, but it fucking looked into every single fucking issue, every single one, right? That we consider major issues, right? He went and broke into his ex's apartment to demonstrate that she was cohabiting with someone. And while you might think that, okay, well, that actually does make a difference when it comes to alimony. It does. It won't end it, especially if you're in Florida, right? But if you're cohabitating with somebody who earns money, you now have a different level of household income, and that can open up a chance for the guy to file for an adjustment, right? Because alimony is about equalizing the financial situation of the two households, right? So when the financial situation of one household changes, then there you go. So I mean, she looks like a greedy cunt. She's using the freaking court system to milk someone dry. She's freaking, she beat him. She beats her new guy, gets away with it, fucking violent, all of this stuff, throws her guy under the bus. The whole, like, mixed bag, okay? There were some things about it that were really fucking stupid, right? About the portrayal of the movement. But everything, whenever they talked about the issues, right? And realistically, it would be a fucking autistic woman who would be like, stop being a jerk. We're supposed to be for equality. Like, why shouldn't women have to sign up for selective service? That makes sense.
Max, did you want to ask Karen a question?
Yeah, I'm glad that you sort of got that positive element out of it, but I think what ruined it for me is the fact that they were implying throughout the entire episode that sort of the women's side of this whole ideological debate was sort of being painted as, you can have the feminist side and you don't need the MRA side because feminists are able to recognize these issues, and you don't need to have this as the way the TV show portrays it, as a misogynist group. That's sort of what ruined it for me. You know what I mean?
But can I just say something? The thing is that women right now, or whatever the hell, they were the woman who was part of that group, who the FBI agent,
right.
the FBI agent, she puts out her card. So she is part of that group, and that group is obviously appears very extreme. And the leader is a woman who's willing to shout out false accusations about the FBI to the crowd just to rile them up. So I mean, they're pretty extreme themselves. So it doesn't necessarily say that the feminist group is able to deal with these issues. In fact, it sort of suggests that this is like just warfare between the two groups, and neither group is dealing with the issues. Which is a little step forward, but
actually, it's promoting a very clever narrative. It's a very clever ploy that's been I've been watching this get used for a couple of years now by feminists. This is really underhanded. Men's issues are legitimate. We can acknowledge men's issues. We can acknowledge all of these things, but shame on men for talking about them. Shame on men for wanting to do something about them. And of course, the only men who would care about things like this are men who are malicious or malevolent or underhanded or sneaky or bad in some way or another. But in the end, no man care about it. You're just like, no. This is not good. This is not here to persuade the public that men have issues. That there are things that need to be dealt with, that there are things that are wrong that need to be fixed. That's not what this was written to portray. It's not what feminists are trying to do when they say this shit either. It is all about taking control of the narrative and shutting out the people who are trying to change law and policy so that these issues are no longer a problem. It's all about keeping control and keeping that law and policy in place by silencing the only people who have stepped up to try to do anything about it. That's why you have the guy, you have the Hispanic guy, the stereotypical Hispanic tough guy, macho man, who is opposed to circumcision, but is also opposed to there being a lawsuit, there being a movement to stop it. He's obviously saying that circumcision is a bad thing, but the fact that it's happening isn't. And it's the same thing throughout the entire show. All these guys are bad people for wanting the things they want, and they have to associate
just like
thinking that a woman deserves to be raped for being dressed, being dressed unmodestly. They have to associate that with all of the other issues. They have to associate being a scam artist with advocating for equally shared parenting and advocating for equal treatment in criminal court, because God forbid anybody do anything about those issues. This isn't any effort at all to get those issues out to the public. And if you think for a moment that the public isn't aware of it, you're not talking to very many people in person. Because every time I talk to somebody about men's rights issues, they already know that these issues exist. They just don't know that there are rational people out there trying to deal with them. That's what this show is about. It's about making sure that it stays that way.
Max?
Yeah, and by the way, I think everybody on this panel would agree that the guy, the leader, I can't remember what the name of the character was that was leading that Men Now group. If he was a real person...
His name was Paul, as in Paul Elam. That was his name. His name was Paul.
The murder victim was Emil, and the other guy was Paul, yeah.
It's interesting, my ears kind of perked up when I heard that the other woman's name was Karen, but anyways.
Yep.
If that guy was a real person, I think everybody on this panel would have a strong urge to punch him in the face as well. It's too bad that he doesn't exist.
Well, no, he does. He's Peter Nolan.
Oh.
Trade copyright.
Oh, for God's sake.
Who's
Oh, shit. Peter. Well, tell him who Peter Nolan is.
Peter Nolan is a. You'd have to see it to believe it, right? He is a guy who thinks that governments have no intrinsic right to govern, or to you don't have any obligation to be subject to a government that you live, of a country that you live in. You can just declare that the government is illegitimate and you are not its subject, and none of the laws apply to you, and then you can set up a system of parallel justice in which somehow, through some kind of mystical woo, you can have your own private courts that will punish women who commit crimes against men, and that will be somehow legitimated in some weird way. He's a lunatic. He's an absolute lunatic, and a lot of his rhetoric is extremely violent and extremely sexist and extremely just absolutely batshit insane.
Okay,
right?
just a sec, but you're not married to him, right?
I'm not married to Paul Elam either.
I just wanted to make sure, because of course Hollywood depictions of reality. Can I just point something out? There was this one moment in the film, in the show, where I was just like, it was another hilarious moment. So, it was like they pointed out the lack of rights that men have. So I think it was the female character who was talking about a lack of, I think it was child custody. So why not have 50-50 child custody? Why can't men have the right to 50-50 child custody? And and then they said, but does that justify the existence? Does the lack of men's rights justify the existence of a men's rights group?
That's a normal thing. That's a normal fucking reaction from people.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
That's the thing. I mean, there was a whole bunch of, when you look at, the macho Cuban guy, right, and the head of the lab, the black woman, I can't ever remember her name, and they're discussing spousal violence, and she's like, it's attitudes like yours that are the reason why men don't come forward when they're being abused, right? So essentially, there is a meta critique going on, right? Showing that there are biases, showing all of this, and then I mean, it is really realistic, because when you bring these things up to members of the public, right? I've learned that the best way to do that is not to say I'm a men's rights activist. I bring up a single issue, right? And it's the same reaction. Well, but does that really justify a men's rights movement?
Yeah, what I noticed in it, there was a lot of very accurate depictions of the reactions of guys who aren't really at a point where they can accept the idea of being vulnerable.
Oh, and women that were reacting like, what? I thought that was for people who were marginalized or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there were some very, like, that, I have gone out into the great beyond, otherwise known as real life, and I have interacted with people who aren't, like, they recognize there's some issues, but the guys do that, and it's a way of distancing themselves, I think, from the vulnerability. They're just not at the point where they can integrate the idea of being vulnerable and also being a man. So they do things like that. Oh, no, a real man wouldn't get punched, and I've seen that. Or alternatively, I'll bring up an issue, and they'll say, but women still have it worse because rape, and stuff like that. Because it's the idea that men are vulnerable because they're men is so foreign to them, and I think a threat to their sense of identity. And there are men out there like that. There are a lot of men out there like that who react in that way. So I think that was accurate to reality. I even think the idea that superficially, to a superficial level, women were more sympathetic to the issues in the show was also accurate, because I find that's true as well. Women are sympathetic to the issues up to the point, a lot of women are, up to the point where they're expected to actually change their behavior and do something about it. And at that point, at the point where the expectation comes in that they actually be held to a standard, they start to pull off. And I find it like I think it was accurate on that score. I take what Canna is saying as well, that there's a way what they're doing is they're ostracizing anybody who does anything about the issues. And I also like to point out that in the discussion in the chat that Peter Mullen doesn't identify as a men's rights activist. And the funny thing is that if, for example, Andrea Dworkin didn't identify as a feminist, or Susan Brown Miller, or Gloria Steinem, or Lena Dunham, or any of the other, or Mary Koss, if these people didn't identify as feminists, we wouldn't blame feminism for them. So what the hell? Why Peter Nolan? He doesn't even want to call himself a men's rights activist.
Because it wasn't Peter Nolan. It was the MRA of feminist imagining. This is a straw man argument. They've basically taken a straw man argument and put it into the show. The straw man argument is that men's rights activists say women deserve to be raped or earn a rape if they're dressed inappropriately. When it's actually, feminists make that the argument when they're responding to women are wise to learn to defend themselves, because no matter how much we know that crime is wrong, there are still people who are going to commit crime. There are still bad people, or at least people who do bad things. And feminists respond to that with, you said she dressed wrong and deserved to get raped. And that's where that comes from. It's the straw man, not Peter Nolan or Peter Nolan. And the rest of this wasn't done to be accurate. This wasn't done to be realistic. This is the men are the problem narrative. Feminists could just solve men's issues, or women could just solve men's issues for them, according to people who think like this, if the men would just get out of the way and let them do it. It's the men are the problem narrative. It's not these attitudes exist. I don't believe for a minute that the writers of this show have any respect at all for men. Just watching the way they were portrayed, they were so stereotyped, and so it wasn't just that they were flawed, it was that their flaws were bigger than anything else about them.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, Hannah. I mean, I enjoy disagreeing as well, admittedly, but at this point I do agree. I agree that it's entirely possible that what they're doing is basically saying, yeah, there are issues, but nobody should ever address them, and if they do, they're assholes. Because that's
and it's also, it's not nobody should ever address them. It's not for men to do.
Yeah.
It's a woman's prerogative to address them. Women are the ones that know what's right. Women are the ones that know what needs to be done. Look, see, the women are brilliant, but the men are idiots. Shut those men up. That's what this is. And the portrayal of feminists as being equally, well, they weren't really equally, but being loudmouthed and dishonest and so on. They really were given, kid glove treatment here.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
the protest
also,
was
not
also even extreme. I mean, they were barely, like, if you compare what we saw in this to maybe the protest at the University of Toronto, and some of the other stuff that the bomb threats that have been called in to men's issues events and to Gamergate events. I think this was soft pitching to the feminists and hardballing the MRAs.
I don't know. I don't know. Like the whole keying of cars and breaking car windows and things like that. That just went by without any kind of, do you have any proof that it was feminist groups who did this? No, it was just, so, I mean, like, it
was because it didn't matter.
It wasn't shown, but it was implied that this was a believable thing, that feminists would actually, like, break the guys, we don't drive nice cars anymore because feminists keep freaking, taking tire irons to them. So
the one thing that I did notice was the attitude towards that. I wonder why. The sarcastic, well, maybe they're doing that because you guys are assholes.
Yeah.
That doesn't get implied the other way around.
No.
When did they ask the feminist, maybe he's stalking you because you're an asshole?
Well, they didn't, but I think they did imply that, which one? The one, the black woman being stalked by, I think that was pretty heavily implied that she was being stalked because she was, I mean, maybe I'm reading into it, but I don't know. She presented as sympathetic.
It was implied that the fight went both ways. That she gave as good as she got online, but it wasn't implied that she deserved being stalked. It was implied that they deserved having the attacks they had, their windows bashed and their cars keyed.
Well, but also you look at it and you look at it too. I mean, she essentially said that she was being stalked because he would go to places where she was doing business as a feminist activist and
her home too. So, fair enough. And he would protest. Whereas that accusation that she made that he was stalking her and protesting her with a bullhorn, versus the men's rights accusations that the feminists were taking tire irons to their cars and keying them. I mean, if you look at both of them in conjunction, we'd have to probably go back and look at how each one was framed. I mean, you got two different accusations going on here, and one is far, far more severe, like actual damage to property. And that kind of aggressive damage is sort of scary, like tire irons to car windows versus going where you work or even if you're home and doing a bullhorn protest. I mean, there's a level of severity in presentation there. And
but notice that they didn't balk at her referring to that as a stalking type behavior. Whereas, so he's going places where she is, and that's being treated like, stalking. They do the same thing. The feminists are doing the same thing to this men's rights group. They protest everywhere these guys go, and it's treated as a legitimate behavior.
But
just looking at that, it looks like the portrayal isn't intended to show the way people's attitudes are. It's intended to be the attitude. It is the attitude of the writers.
Well, but there's the other thing. Like they also say that the men's rights activists have to go further to evade the feminist violence and and aggression. They have to actually make false identities, change their cars, and it's like
lie and say, oh, I'm actually shutting the organization down. I've had a change of heart.
Just in case someone tries to murder them.
Yeah, and saying that, she's like, I had to write his lines that, I know why he said that. I wrote those lines for him. We have lies that we say in a confrontation with a feminist, right? Where we lie and say, oh, we're not actually doing that anymore. We're closing up shop, whatever, because that's better than being punched in the face.
Yeah, I mean, if you look objectively at what at the conflict on the one side, you have a feminist who say, well, I was going to get a restraining order because she was protesting me at my place of work and sometimes at my home. And we don't even know if that's completely true. Regardless, I mean, I guess there's some corroborative evidence to suggest that's true. On the one hand, we have, they were protesting us. On the other hand, on the men's rights side, we have a murder. We have tire irons being taken to cars. We have violence to the point where the men's rights activists have to make up lies and new identities to prevent themselves from having violence done to them. And and of course the central thing is the murder. And we have all of this aggression from the feminist side. You look at the way the two sides are portrayed.
The murder turned out to not be from the feminist group. It was a men's issue, but it wasn't from the feminist group. And this looks to me like they threw enough of a bone to the men's rights movement to sort of assuage the opposition to the way men's rights activists are being portrayed in this. But there's a definite effort here to portray men as the problem, to portray men's rights activists as assholes, idiots, scam artists, and malicious in some ways. It's very much these issues are legitimate.
Scam artists?
But men's, all that talk about the money, all that talk about, that was an attempt to make men's rights activists look like scam artists who take in a lot of money and then don't do anything for the people who are funding them.
Okay,
this
enough.
This was not intended at all to be. I know you guys are seeing good in the fact that they portrayed the issues as they are, but this really looked to me like it was intended to delegitimize activism that is outside of the umbrella of current establishment.
Well, okay, I will agree with you that may be what the intention is, right? But when you sort of look at take away the intention, right, and look at sort of the different ways that they actually reflected what's realistically going on, that it is often men who are like, oh no, that domestic violence isn't against men, doesn't happen. I mean, like, what the hell? So often that is the reaction from men. So often it is a woman who actually says, all kinds of things, like, regardless of intent. I think compare it to the episode of Law & Order SVU on Gamergate, right? Compare it to that. And tell me that this isn't an improvement on essentially getting the issues out. It's even an improvement in terms of portraying men's rights groups, because through the entire thing, right, through the entire episode, violence was targeted on men's rights activists, right? It was implied, it was stated, it was shown, right? You didn't see any member of the men's rights group doing anything violent.
No, I think they just made this a more subtle slam.
Compare that to kidnapping Anita Sarkeesian's clone and, making an ISIS-style video threatening to kill her.
Yeah, that's a definite improvement.
I think they just made this a more subtle slam.
But they don't need to make a more subtle slam.
Yeah, they were so badly ridiculed for the last one. They ended up so much hearing criticism from the movement and so much ridiculed by other people who, maybe were not part of the movement but who were familiar with it, that they had to make it more subtle. But
there's no they, because there's the two creative teams behind Bones and SVU. Like this, it's a completely, they're two groups of people. I mean, you can say the Hollywood is a they, but that seems sort of.
But it's one attitude, and I don't believe that the entirety of television production and Hollywood production exists without networking the same way that, say, the media networks. Especially given that there are political associations among them. That's don't even go there. No, this is just a more subtle slam. I hate to be negative, but I think this is just another. It's another SVU designed to not be as blunt and obvious as SVU.
All right, I want to get away from the actual men's rights plot because subplot is also.
No. Let me say one more thing about the men's rights plot, right? That I think needs to be said. Okay, because you have Temperance Brennan, right? She's a card-carrying member of this women's organization, right? She thinks that they're not radicals, they're just doing good work, they're blah, 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 right? Now, she pulled out her card and showed it to those women protesting in order to stave off violence. I'm on your side, guys. I'm on your side, guys, right? And you can sort of see it register after she'd told Booth over and over and over again that, this isn't a radical organization, they're just protesting, wage inequality at this hotel, and that's good work, and I've been a card carrying, but she's probably never been an active member. She's probably just paid her dues and gotten the newsletters, and that's it, right? And she's never seen them in action, and you can just sort of tell, you can sort of see it dawn on her during the protest, and given what the leader, right, was doing, making false accusations against her and Booth in order to rile up the crowd and incite violence. And you can tell that she knows that this is an attempt to incite violence because she pulls out her card and says, I'm on your side, right, as she's getting into the car, right? So you can sort of see it dawn on her that maybe this organization isn't quite as benign as she thought, as she initially thought. And so I think there are a lot of things in this that, while, and Hannah may be entirely right about the intent of the episode, right? But feminists do not come off as
the
remotely benign. They don't come off as the underdog in this. And I don't think that this episode was there to say, we the writers, we the creative team think that these issues should be handled by feminists. Because I think that they portrayed feminists, these feminist groups, in a particularly negative light compared to what they would normally be portrayed as. So I think that that's another thing to look at as far as, regardless of intention, what the impression is. I mean, because people are going to be watching this. This is mainstream network TV. This is just broadcast TV, essentially. None of these people are going to be familiar with the men's rights movement. They probably have a fairly benign feeling about feminists, even if they're a little bit crazy, they're not really dangerous or violent, right? And throughout the entire episode, they're shown instances of these feminist groups who are violent, who are not benign, who are capable of doing vandalism, who are capable of all kinds of bad things, bad acts. And so I think, regardless of the intent of the writers, I think that most people who have never really thought about any of these things, they're going to get an impression. They're not going to get the impression that, we should leave these issues, these men's issues, up to feminists or whatever. They may think, these men's rights groups seem really radical, but they're also going to leave with the idea that, okay, so do these feminist groups. What the fuck, right? So I think that the fallout from the episode might be very different from the intention in terms of just the impression that people get. Particularly since the men's rights group was not implicated in any kind of violence whatsoever.
I don't know. I have my doubts. And I have my doubts in part because of the way that the men's rights group was portrayed, and because they didn't actually...
They didn't actually show the feminist group getting violent. Like, when you describe, the girls were yelling. They were carrying signs, and they were standing around and shaking their fists. But they weren't actually getting violent. In fact, they were really kind of tame in comparison to what actual feminist protests look like.
Oh, they look like mosh pits. But Brian, why don't you get in here and we can get another voice in?
Well, there was one thing that I was looking at was I think that what they're doing, or maybe what they're doing, is trying to portray the Brennan character as the most reasonable in the show regarding the issues, because she was taking sides on both, ends, and she would say things like, well, there are issues with the draft, or there are issues with fathers' rights. And then on the other hand, she would mention the wage gap, where the women were protesting. She was, I think, made out to be the most reasonable voice. And when you look at what issues the Men Now group were talking about, it's like you walk in on the meeting and the guy is up there, Paul, and he's talking, and the stuff sounds really reasonable. He starts by saying fathers, custody rights, and then he goes into rape shield laws, and then he goes like way far afield and talks about a woman who dresses like a slut is begging to be raped. And so you get this crazy escalation, and I think that, and of course, he goes from, again, saying reasonable things like that, and things like circumcision is bad and so on, but then he goes into this crazy town area where he says, sometimes bitches have to be muzzled from time to time, and then he silences his wife, by yelling at her or whatever in front of everyone, and there's a lot of implications that come with it. And then what we get is essentially they're painting this picture that the men's rights group, at least in this show, which is, for people who don't know who the MRM is, that's going to be their only sort of example of what it's supposed to be like, which I think sort of lends to Hannah's argument about it being a hit piece, even if it's a soft one. They're going to see it as, oh yeah, they're men that are basically using these sort of real problems to forward their own misogynistic attitudes towards women. And Brennan, who is one of the good feminists, and not like the radicals, which are out there trying to play the victim and protesting and stuff. She is one of the good ones, and she's doing it the right way. She's doing feminism right, though, specifically. Not men's rights, but feminism right. And that's kind of what I took away from it. And when you look at the way every male character, even the ones not involved with the plot of the whole men's rights group, are portrayed, they don't have much in the way of redeeming qualities. I mean, even the guy, the what's the boyfriend of the husband?
In the wheelchair, Hodgins?
No, David Boreanaz.
Booth.
Booth.
The thing is that these are stock characters. These are characters that have been involved in this show for a long time, and so they essentially, the audience is fond of them already. There's no I don't think that the way these particular male characters are portrayed in this episode is going to make people dislike them or make people think men are bad. The audience already really likes them, right? So, just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
Are you done, Brian?
Yeah, that was it. I mean, basically, I just was. What it looks like to me is essentially Brennan is the smartest woman in the room. And actually, some of the other female characters were pretty good too. At least they were trying to be. But I think that Brennan was basically sitting on the they were trying to put her in that sweet spot of understanding both sides, but also being the most reasonable. And I think that that's going to, I think, what Hannah might have been trying to get at by saying, well, look, there's a men's rights group and they're actually bringing up issues, but the group itself is being sort of made out to be not sufficient or not able to do these things because they hate women or they have problems with women or whatever. Okay, and that's all I'm going to say on that.
Well, some things that came in mind while you were talking is that how can you expect, if men have legitimate issues, why would you expect men not to reflect the fact that they have legitimate issues? I mean, if you're lacking rights, there's going to be an effect. And that's, you're gonna get angry people, sad people, depressed people, people with issues, people with mental concerns. That's gonna happen. And it's like they're expecting, they say, yeah, men have issues, but men shouldn't look like they have issues, which is totally bankrupt, morally bankrupt. But the other thing I wanted to point out is, anyone else get the sense that the female, the autistic female, punched the guy because her husband apparently was constantly, I want to punch him. So eventually she just punched him because she's like, okay, I'll do it for you.
Yeah, actually, I think that was what it is. I'll take this one for the team. I'll get the disciplinary action because you'd be punished more. That's I think what she did, and I think because she saw him building up to it, right? And she saw him about to lose his temper. Remember, these are characters that have been interacting with each other for, and he's supposedly a bit of a, loose cannon, the whole bit, right? Now, one thing that I do want to say about Temperance Brennan and how she reacted to all of this, in terms of the character, because I watched the first 2 seasons or something like that of Bones, and it makes perfect sense that she would be the one, right, to sort of even just look at the surface of an issue, right? Equal pay is and if this hotel is paying its female staff 2/3 of what it pays its male staff, if she doesn't look any deeper into it, to see, why, if there's a reason for that, right? She would be like, yeah, no, that's totally a cool thing that they're protesting this, right? But she would also be, because, she's just her character is one that is just extremely clinical in her thinking, right? Even if she's not looking at something in depth, if something doesn't really make sense. So, of course, women should be included in selective service. It's only fair. We're supposed to live in an equal society, right? And all of these things, right? Her reactions and her ability to sort of, because everybody else seemed to have this sort of inconsistent emotional reaction to things, right? All of the male characters, even, the Cuban guy with the circumcision, circumcision is bad, but it's not really a big problem. Those are reactions that are consistent with people who just have normal emotional responses to things, right? And I think Brennan was a good foil in terms of her essentially just looking at things completely detached from any kind of emotionality or sentimentality and saying, no, women should have to sign up for the draft. Why shouldn't they?
Well, just to expound on that, so she probably, it does sort of read like she took the one for the team, at least and of course it wasn't appropriate at all. And the other thing, wow, there was something else that was I was noticing about her behavior. The protest. It almost, I think I remember the sequence of events. She pulls out her card, and she says, "I'm a card-carrying member," and then the people sort of calmed down. Was that the sequence of events?
Yes.
No.
No, they didn't really calm down.
They turned their attention back to the hotel.
Yeah, they turned their attention back to the hotel. But they had been ignoring her. They weren't even paying attention to her anyway until she pulled out that card.
I wanted to point something out, and it's in conjunction with the fact that she punched the guy after her husband had been repeatedly saying, "I want to punch this guy," throughout the entire show. And it felt like, yeah, I'm going to do this because it'll be less, I will get less from, and that, in the way that she thinks, it sort of makes sense. I'm going to solve this problem by taking the heat. But I think that she pulled the card because she thought that her husband, which I do not know why these two people are working together and married, but whatever, her husband might be in trouble from the crowd. Yeah,
in other words, she was protecting him. Pulled out her card because she needed to draw their attention away from him. And I can see that. I wanted to point a couple things out, though. Did you notice that as soon as she said the MRA had a point, that's when he started going off the deep end? It's like instantly, oh, he has a point. Well, now he has to ruin that. That it wasn't, I don't think that's coincidental. I think that was very deliberate.
That a little bit more? Can you just explain?
Immediately after, in the meeting, when she's in the meeting and Paul is talking, and he says the thing about the draft and he says the thing about the parental rights, And she says, well, he did have the guy, her husband says, I want to punch this guy. And she goes, well, he did have a legitimate point about the draft. Then he says the thing about rape. And then he says, women who go out dressed scantily clad are asking to be raped.
Well, but then even that statement asking to be raped while being false is not saying that they should be raped.
Right, but it's still a deliberate placing of those two things in conjunction. Well, he has a legitimate point. Let's see if we can just ruin that right now. That's
I agree. I agree. I agree. Yeah, that's and then it ramped up the male character, the Bones' husband, quite a bit more.
Yeah, but the other thing is, isn't there a trope? I'm not real big on learning about this, but I remember us going through tropes before. There's like a magic black man trope or something where there's the all wise black man in movies and stuff. That,
yes.
Okay, this is the magic. Yeah, this is the magic autistic person. She seems to only get this stuff because she looks at it, from the unemotional perspective, so to speak, and it's kind of the same tropey portrayal, and I don't know how to explain it other than to say that really sticks in my craw. That bugs me that they're portraying this woman as having all the answers, and it's not directly linked, but I don't think it's coincidental either.
Well, yeah, but they have a lot of ridiculous tropey stuff going on.
But that's her portrayal through the entire however many seasons of the show, right? This is nothing new, in this episode. Of course they would essentially portray her as the one who just gets it because she's completely emotionally detached, or she gets completely clinically, because that's the entire point of the show. And the books, the Temperance Brennan books, were actually written by a woman on the autism spectrum who had a degree in forensic anthropology or something like that, worked as one or whatever, right? So you essentially, these sort of semi-autobiographical, I'm sure that the show takes many liberties in terms of her characterization in order to make her somewhat understandable and relatable to the audience. But I mean, half of the show is it's like a Dr. House thing where, Dr. House is so popular because he's is brutally honest all the time. Right. And she's popular because she's brutally logical all the time. So
yeah, it's exactly the thing that gets me in trouble with people all the time. It's the reason I'm unpopular, or have always been unpopular, because I say things that as bluntly as she said, that maybe she bugs me partly because a lot of the portrayal reminds me of things that people have told me are rude and obnoxious to do, and I should stop doing them. And here we have this portrayal of this woman's a genius because she's doing these things, and it's like, really? In real life, you're not a genius for doing these things. In real life, everybody hates you if you do these things. But the other thing that really bugs me is, here they had all of these really good, or they would have been really good points about men's issues. This is real, this happens. And then they legitimize punching a guy because of something he said. If it had been the other way around, if it had been her wanting to punch one of her fellow feminists and her husband did it for her, that never would have worked. But in this episode, you have a guy saying things that are upsetting to women because they're asshole things to say. And because he's an asshole and he's saying shitty things to women, punching him is a legitimate response.
Well, clearly it's not a legitimate response.
No, but I think
it's discipline, but it's portrayed in a way that it's intended for the viewer to sympathize with the character's desire to do so.
Of course, but the whole thing is that she's taking the onus off of her husband, who she knows is going to blow his stack, right?
Yeah, but
and one of the things too, like you say, well, when people act like this in real life, everybody hates you, right? Well, there's been 6 seasons or 8 seasons or whatever of this show that started off with everybody having issues with this woman. And they've all sort of, because it's all the same cast every show, they've all sort of figured out a way to get along with her. And the whole purpose of the character arc for this particular character, Temperance Brennan, is to essentially humanize her and to show that she really struggles with the social stuff, and she really has an issue with, not being, she doesn't take issue with not being liked, but she has a problem as far as, people do react to her in that way that you're talking about. So I think you have to take those things in the context of the entire story arc of the entire show, right? So
Okay.
Yeah, it's still unrealistic that many people would actually begin to accept her. It really is. Just from personal experience, it's unrealistic that many people that quickly would begin to accept her. In fact, it's unrealistic that she would be able to remain in a working environment with the same group of people for that long and act that way.
Okay, well, let's get to the subplot, because I think that actually the subplot had a lot more to say about men's rights, men's issues, and than the main plot, ironically, because the subplot is basically about a paraplegic, or a man who's recently been paralyzed from the waist down, and he has to deal with this and deal with the fact that he's no longer able to do the things that he could do before. And as a man, of course, he also has to deal with the feelings of being vulnerable, of not being as capable, as not being as useful as he was, and how the show actually dealt with all of that. And I found it. I thought that there was something they were trying to say something about, all of the stuff that he's going through, and all of the obvious mental torment that he's going through, and that he's lashing out angrily at people because of it. And I thought they were almost trying to say something about that aspect of men's issues, about the aspect of going through a situation where a man becomes quote unquote useless, or ceases to have the same kind of abilities that he had before and has to adjust to it. And in a lot of cases, I thought the subplot was really poorly done, because it seemed like they were blaming the guy and putting the focus on his anger over it, and the fact that he needs to treat, the woman, his partner. He needs to put aside the anger and the pain of becoming a paraplegic so recently, to make sure that he constantly treats his partner in the quote unquote right way. And I was watching all this, and I was like, I'm not sure what they're trying to get at with this. It almost feels like this subplot is presenting the notion that men's issues are something that they need to deal with themselves, so that they can maintain a certain homeostasis for women, comfortable atmosphere for women. But I'd like to get your opinions on it.
I don't think so. I think that because of the severity of the issue, right? And it was just like so much of it was, and it wasn't just that he'd been paralyzed, but that physiotherapy was no longer an option because all of the nerves were completely severed. There was no neural activity at all, and so it was just bad news that they'd gotten. And you could see her reaching out to him the way she would, see him trying to treat him like a child, or reaching out to her the way she would a female friend who was going through the same thing, and him just being like, no, you need to stop, you need to stop, you need to stop, right? Right from the very beginning, like, just, no. This is not...
Yeah, that's I just want to get this out before I forget it. She was reaching out to her. She was reaching out in a way to try to tend to him, and it only emphasized his feelings of being helpless and useless.
Yes, and so essentially what you had, and it came to a head at the end of the show, right, where he essentially tells her, you think that I'm like. You think I'm angry? Do you have any idea how much anger I'm holding back every second of every day? And every time you tell me, oh, you're so proud of me, all of this, all you're doing is undermining me, essentially, is what he says to her. All you're doing is undermining my sense of, personal, my sense of self-sufficiency, my sense of being okay, right? When you treat me this way, right? And if you are unable to to tolerate the fact that I'm angry over this, right? And that this is an issue. Like I'm fucking paralyzed, bitch. And there's nothing that can be done about that, right? If you can't, maybe you need to just go, right? And I'm sorry, but like that's gonna resonate with a lot of people. I mean, like the whole fucking time she seemed feeling sorry for herself. Here's this guy in a wheelchair trying to, like pull together the remnants of his life and having to come to terms with how it's changed. And she's all like, he was mean to me, and being such a milquetoast, right? She's not being strong for him. She's like, I told you I was proud of you. You should say something nice to me back, right?
There's some things that came out of that I saw that were interesting, just judging from what I've heard from like Tom Golden, that men access, or what I've read in his books, that men access their sorrow through their anger. And I wonder if that's what he's trying to incite. Like, it might have been better for her to just dish it back to him, to the point where he could get that anger out and then access his sorrow at the end of it. I was just, at the end of that, watching all that, I'm like, just either bitch back at him or do something else to support him. Don't just stand there and stare and look like, oh yes, I'm the vulnerable center of all of this, like a child. Like, and it doesn't have to be that you have to be like, tolerate his abuse. Maybe what he's after is for you to get angry too. And then you can process. He can access, like Tom Golden was saying. You get angry with him. You get angry at them. He gets angry at you, and then he can finally get to the point where he can access his pain. And it's like the way she was responding to it in such a limp, childish, mawkish way was just fucking annoying.
It's probably one of the most accurate portrayals in the show, though.
Yes, you're probably right. But she doesn't have to take his abuse. In fact, I don't even think that that's what he was intending. I think on a very unconscious level, completely overwhelmed by the situation he's in, he's reaching for what he needs to access his sorrow. And according to Tom Golden, men access their sorrow through their anger. So he's reaching for her to get angry at him, then with him, and then help him. And
there's a lot of nuance they left out of this.
Well, I mean, it's a one out, right?
Like the thing is, when you get into a situation where you have lost an ability to do something that doesn't just represent your ability to do something, it represents a level of freedom that you have in the world. Not just freedom, like your right to free speech or your human rights, but your actual mobility, your freedom to get around and do things for yourself, and your ability to feel useful, and your ability to achieve the things that you want to achieve, and so on. That you now face a hurdle to get over in order to do those things that you didn't face before, and you have to relearn how to do all of the things that relied on that thing that you just lost. Anger is not the only thing that happens. Anger is the thing that is the easiest to express at that moment, because everything else that you're going through at that moment, or everything else that you're going through during that experience, is more complex and more interconnected and more difficult for you to understand, much less to actually describe it or show it or act on it. And so you lash out at the people around you. And the hard thing is, it's not just lack of nuance at his end that they failed on in this show. It's also a lack of nuance at her end. And she didn't understand what he was going through, and she didn't understand what her reaction should be. But they really sort of one-dimensionalized her in a way that from seeing this happen to people in my family, and from on a much smaller level or to a much smaller degree going through it temporarily myself, with developing or having an injury that developed into a temporary handicap until I healed from it. I don't know, the way people react, I don't know if I can describe this. There's a well-meaningness that people engage in, that there's a helplessness that they feel towards your situation. There's a helplessness to change things, and there's a helplessness to reach where you are, because they know that you're going through something they don't understand because they're on the outside of it. And they know that everything they do is wrong. And you watch people, I don't know if you've ever watched anybody do this, but they sort of feel around the person to try to figure out some way or another that they can reach in and improve the situation. And they'll do it even when there is no way to improve the situation. The situation is done. You can't fix it. Now what do you do? You can't just be there with the person and feel that you've done enough. You can't just listen and feel that you've done enough, even though a lot of times those are the things that the person needs the most. And so people will try to solve the problem, or people will try to come up with ways to make the other person feel better, when what they really need to do is work their way through what they're feeling instead of getting over it. Just like grief. You don't just get over grief. You work through grief. You experience grief. You don't necessarily wallow into it, but you drop down into it. And you have to climb your way out of it, but you don't just get over it. And people have a way of trying to write the plot of other people's recovery for them, because it's the only thing that they feel like they can do. And they really fell short in portraying this. As far as I'm concerned, they really fell short in portraying the way that people do this.
Well, I mean, they're not stellar writers, but with the man, what I got the sense of is that he was, in some ways, I think the fact that the others were just treating him like, I don't know, they're just treating him, when he would bitch at them, they would just sort of take it. And I think that was disturbing him even more, to the point where he was just getting worse and worse and worse. I think he really wanted them to actually fight back and treat him like you would a person that you respect to that degree. Like, the fact that they weren't actually saying, yeah, fuck you. What the fuck is he? What the hell? You're so freaking bitchy. Did you, or even put in some mean, like, jibes, because it seemed like he was wanting that, like, did you lose your did you get PMS when you got crippled too, or something? Just push back. It felt like he was wanting that, because he wanted confirmation that he wasn't just this helpless, wounded thing that they could no longer treat like a human being with his, and it would put him up to
Alison,
the expectations that he'd be tough.
Not just like a human being, but specifically like a man, like an adult, capable man. And that's something that there's something I watched a family member go through, where he was for a long time treated like a child after his injury, and it broke him completely. He was never the same again.
And I think that's what we're seeing with this. He's wanting them to treat him the way they treated him before, and they probably wouldn't take his shit before. Well, but now since he's a cripple doing it, they will take it.
There was another thing he was doing that is, it's very characteristic. He tried to sort of, I don't know, actualize himself, maybe is the word I'm thinking of, through work. I am still myself. I'm not the wheelchair that I'm in now. I'm still myself. Well, the way I can show this is I can do work.
The kind of work he was doing, Karen, the kind of work he was doing was the intellectual work. So he may have actually overcompensated because he was feeling a physical disability, and that's why he was dismissing the other work of the other people. because he needed more of a sense of, and he was overcompensating because he had lost that physicality. He was overcompensating with his intellectual analysis, and thus aggravating the others.
On top of this, okay, if you had watched any of the earlier seasons or whatever, I mean, his character was kind of the one that everybody would just kind of like, crack wise on, right? And make jokes at his expense, right? Like this is just, so he was constantly being teased. He was constantly being kind of poked and all of this, right? And then all of a sudden, this thing happens to him, and everybody starts treating him differently. Everybody starts treating him deferentially. Everybody starts treating him sensitively. Everybody starts treating him completely different from the way they did before, right? They're not cracking wise at him. They're not freaking giving him those little jabs and the ribbing that he used to get because he was the short, nerdy one who, is supposed to be not good looking, but actually is, because it's TV. So essentially what you have is, he's not just a cardboard cutout of any human being in that wheelchair, right? He's literally now in a situation where everybody's walking on eggshells around him. Nobody's making any jokes at his expense, right? They're treating him completely differently, as if he is like this fragile, useless thing, right? And so I think that if you actually sort of understand the character a little bit, it makes a little bit more sense why this would really, really, really upset him. Why it would upset him that they would suggest that maybe they should meet at another diner for breakfast or whatever, right? Like that because to make things easier for him. Like when did they ever make things easy for me? They were always like freaking, treating me like the butt of every other joke, and I liked it because I knew they liked me, and it was just the way we. Yeah,
it's like in the space of that relationship that they had is now he has become defined as the guy in the wheelchair. I think that's what he's experiencing.
He's completely
and there's
from all of the interactions that he really enjoyed, all of the things that made him feel close with those people. Those are all gone now.
If they're accurate in their portrayal of what happens in circumstances like this, the next thing that's going to happen is some of the people who have previously been close to him, who have previously been portrayed as being close to them, will start distancing themselves from him because they don't know how to handle the situation. And rather than trying to make the effort to find their balance with him, they'll just start avoiding the situation, the thing that makes them uncomfortable, which is not knowing what to do around the guy in the wheelchair. So they'll stop coming over, or they'll stop seeking him out to work with, or they'll stop having conversations with him. They'll stop showing up at activities that he's at, or that he's central to the activity, and things like that. And this is another thing that commonly happens when you go through, a large portion of your life and build a life, for yourself, and then all of a sudden there's a significant change like that. And the people that knew you before, there's a significant portion of them that just can't handle the change in your life, and they can't handle their discomfort with the change in your circumstances. And they don't walk away because they're mean. They walk away because they don't know what else to do.
Another thing that I wanted to do with the subplot, I mean, this is all good stuff, and it actually brings me to the other part of the subplot that I wanted to address. People who deal with men's issues and men's rights, in this particular case, the treatment of men after they've experienced a situation where they've lost their sense of utility and effectiveness in society, like the guy who became paraplegic. The people who deal with men's issues and have sympathy for men's issues would be the ones who would understand his point of view best. And it just seems interesting that in this show where they portrayed exactly the pain and discomfort and anger that happens when a man becomes or loses out on that sense of manhood, that sense of being a man. And they portray the one group of people who would be most likely to understand and respect and be able to deal and tell the others in his workplace what's going on in his head, and actually be like CV was last night. She spoke about being an advocate for homeless men, but be an advocate for the kind of things that what was the character's name again, Karen?
Hodgins.
That being an advocate for Hodgkin's position or point of view when he can't really articulate it himself. They are portraying that group of people as being swine. And I just found that interesting. Because at the one hand, they have this portrayal, and at the same time, as they portray the one group of people who would be able to access Hodgkin's point of view and be able to explain it in a way that might be sympathetic, at the same time as they portray that group of people as being boorish asshole chauvinists, because I'm pretty sure that the people talking here plus Tom Golden would probably be the ones who could understand what Hodgkins is going through better, at least, than the writers and the other people that they portrayed in the show. But they would portray us as being these chauvinist swine, and we're the ones who would probably be able to at least advocate for Hodgkin's position as a man who's gone through this traumatic event better than any other group. And I just found that interesting, because they're essentially mocking and deriding the advocates, the people who would advocate for someone like Hodgkins, and for understanding what he's going through and understanding his point of view emotionally as a man. And it's like, and then simultaneous with that, they almost portray it like Hodgkins needs to just set aside the fact that he's been paralyzed from the waist down and treat his woman right, and that's all he needs to really do. You know, he can't have those needs. He can't actually need to have somebody get angry with him, then get angry at him, get angry with him, and then move him into a place where he can access his pain, as Tom Golden would describe. And he doesn't need that. He just needs to man up. You know, he doesn't feel like he can, but he needs to.
Because it's not legitimate for him to need somebody to understand him and his needs, because he's a man. It's only legitimate for him to be expected to understand her and her needs because she's a woman.
I don't know. I didn't get that sense from that. I think what I got the sense of is that like she was trying her best, right? And she was portrayed as sort of trying her best to deal with it, but that essentially everything, and you could sort of see this throughout the whole show, the little things that she would do, and he'd be like, please don't do that. You know, because you're making me feel, right, undermined. You're making me feel like a cripple, right? You're treating me like a child, you know, like, I think part of it is, part of what was going on between the two of them is that really that she was maybe reaching out, but she just has no way to reach out in the way that he needs, and that like this is not just a failure on his part to man up, right? It's a failure on her part to understand what he's going through. And you know, that sort of final scene where he was just like, you know, you have no idea how much anger I'm holding back. And if you can't handle that, maybe you need to just go. I think that was really one of the most honest things in the entire episode was that, you know, he just told her the absolute 100% truth, right? If you cannot handle me being like, I don't have time to look after your feelings, right? I'm in a fucking wheelchair. I'm having to learn how to, you know, reconstruct my life. I do not have time to pamper you. I do not have time to consider. So if you're not going to be of help to me, then go.
It'll be interesting to see. Well, this show doesn't really interest me enough to want to keep watching it, but it'd be interesting to see if they follow up on that, or if he learns to get over it in the show. if they portray this as something that he can overcome, the sense of needing to deal with this in his own way, and not having to baby her through it.
Yeah, and it would have been interesting if they had actually, because the thing is that, ironically, a men's rights or men's issues group would be a perfect place for her to go to understand his position. It'd be nice if she had actually gone to a lecture or a talk by Tom Golden at the end or something, and we could have seen an actual men's rights activist or men's rights advocate, or a talk by Warren Farrell. Two of the most gentle men ever. And they could explain to her what was going on and that she shouldn't take it personally, because probably a lot of it is that she's taking it personally. And like you were saying, Hannah, she just doesn't know how to help. Yeah. And even just having a bit of an insight into what he's going through as a man who has been crippled, because who has experienced an injury that has left him disabled. Because it's different than a woman. A woman is more comfortable with that feeling of, being cosseted and coddled and, oh, how are you doing? And all of that stuff. But men aren't. And
because
just to have
there's different expectations that we face.
Yeah, different expectations. And those expectations, I could just imagine just a final scene where she walks into a real men's rights or men's issues group and has and listens to them, let's call him Tom Bolden, explain to the group what men go through when they go through this grieving process related to either losing someone or losing a loss of use of their limbs. And she understands that, and she can depersonalize it and become a stronger person for her spouse. And do what he needs her to do, or at least help in a way that's more productive than what she's doing now. I mean, think about how dare I use the word empowered she might feel. And I could just imagine. I'm imagining this scene, and it's like wonderful in my mind. Unfortunately, they didn't write it, but and this is what the benefit is, not just to women, or not just to men, but to women. Understanding the male point of view is the benefit that these groups give. And it could have so much improved the relationship between these two characters. And it's funny, because the writers will never write something like that. They'll never acknowledge something like that, and that's the reality. It's like a line from No Batteries Not Included. These two characters, if they actually engaged with men's rights activism or men's issues advocacy, it would be just like taking 2 steps to the right and being in the sunlight. And it's a complete miss. And it won't ever happen, because they just can't acknowledge that we are decent people and what we do is a compassionate thing. For whatever reason, they can't acknowledge that. And because of that, they deny people who would otherwise get help and be able to understand things and be able to help each other. They deny them the information that could do so. And that's the funny thing. It's like the subplot. If they had presented men's rights as it actually is, if they had those 2 individuals going through the subplot, the Hodgkins and his wife going through the subplot of dealing with his paralysis, they would have been, by the end of it wouldn't have been a downer ending. They would have discovered something about each other and how to go forward in a positive way. And yet, no, men's rights bad, yo. Like, bro, don't get those brochures away from me. So...
I think that the reason why the show has the is doing this sort of bad misrepresentation probably has more to do with the fact that what the information they're getting about the men's rights movement is coming from probably like feminist sources that don't. Not only do they not understand it, but they have no interest in representing it well. That's why they call them Meninists, because they don't even realize that Meninism is not even a thing. I don't know if you know, but there's lots of feminists and feminist media spaces and news spaces that think Meninism is real and is representative of the MRM. So I think that Bones is getting like second and third
You know what we should do? We should start calling them overly attached girlfriends instead of feminists. If they're going to use a meme, an internet meme to say that's what we are. I think we need to. What would the feminist internet meme be? I think overly attached girlfriend, or
I have one for that. It's actually Jessica Valenti and her quote to the Women Against Feminism, that she took time off from her vacation just to tweet to us that it's okay if we're against feminists and they'd still advocate for us anyway.
Oh, just ban us from conventions.
Yeah. But no, she tweeted
Jessica.
it right to the Women Against Feminism hashtag when it was at its most active in its beginning. It was it was really hilarious and a little bit creepy.
But it's just like, why are you using a joke from what, 4chan? I don't know where the Meninist stuff. It's just a meme. It's freaking hilarious. It's like a laughing witch and her husband saying that they're after our cacks.
It's literally a parody of feminism. It's essentially just a gender-flipped parody of feminism. The air conditioning is sexist. Yeah. That's what it is. That's what Meninism is. It's not a men's rights project. It's a let's mock feminism project. So, I mean...
And it's not even done by men's rights activists.
No!
Oh, okay.
Well, the funny thing is, though, that there are some guys who have found the men's rights movement through it.
Well, yeah, because we get called Meninists.
That's awesome, though. That's absolutely awesome.
Here, this joke was started to make fun of feminism, and it's constructive to make fun of feminism, and it does sort of help understand some things about feminism, and it's also a lot of fun. But it's kind of neat because it actually had a really constructive result, and that it brought new blood into the movement.
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem is, okay, feminists, you don't want to be made fun of, then stop with the manspreading and the mansplaining and the I drink male tears and
the male gaze.
Yes, the male gaze.
Or stare rape.
Yeah, that's homophobic.
We've also determined that the male gaze is bad, and also the male gaze.
Yes.
They are bad, yes.
They are shitlords as well. The male gays are officially oppressors. Misogynist oppressors. So,
we've come full circle from the Red Stocking Manifesto, right? Like, they hated gays back then they liked them for like a few decades, and now they hate them again. It's great.
Yeah, the male gays.
In the interim, they found a way to use them, and when they were no longer useful, they started hating them again.
Yeah. Okay, but we need to wrap up. We're like totally... I think it's time, because, when the off-topic starts...
No, I agree. But I do want to get a summary thought from you guys. I want to get like a short, what are your thoughts on the episode?
So,
like
the actress that played Karen, hot or not?
2 out of 10.
Maybe if she's wearing a tank top and had like a just
short hair,
1980s flat top, right? Maybe.
Or cigars and smoking wine.
Oh man!
And then telling her dog that go away, dog. Shut the fucking dog up, dog. Shut the fuck up, dog. I will kill you.
There was a point in this where Brian's dog was walking around, and I almost shouted at my own dog because all I could hear was toenails while he was talking. I was like, "Fuck, dog!" Right, and then I realized, oh wait, my dog's just lying here sleeping. But.
False accusation.
My final thoughts on this show is it's a mixed bag. Most such shows are either a mixed bag or they are 100% bad. If I were to give it a rating, compared with the SVU Gamergate episode, I would give it like a Gamergate episode would get a 0 out of 10. This one would get a 6 out of 10 as far as actually bringing up the real issues, showing them in a way that, that actually brings them to people's attention. showing realistic responses from a lot of the other people, right? Like, okay, so they have all these problems, but is it with their rights? But does it really justify having a men's rights movement? Those were all realistic things that I think. So they get a big fat F in their portrayal of the men's rights organization, right? But they get a 10 out of 10 for showing feminists as being capable of vandalism, capable of violence, people who are sometimes aggressive, who you might actually need to be afraid of if you put your foot wrong with them, and all of those things. So, I mean, like, total mixed bag. As far as Hannah's statements or assertions about, what their probable intentions were, I think she's probably right. I myself am not so much concerned with their intentions, but with the end product of their intentions being not 100% horrible and awful. And one of the things that I think that this show did not put across was that men's rights activists or men's rights issues should be left to the feminists, because it portrayed the feminists as unreasonable, irrational, violent, and radical. So, totally, they got an A on some things, they got an F on some things, and it was just like kind of varied across the board. There was a whole huge spectrum. So, all in all, bad.
I want to add one thing to they showed not just radical feminists as radical, but a presumably non-radical feminist organization is actually radical.
Yes.
Okay, Hannah, what are your final thoughts on it?
Well, I think you kind of mischaracterized my original or my earlier statements as only being about intent. So I'm going to have to correct that. I don't think it was just about intent. I described the portrayal as well. And I think they gave feminists an out in Temperance being a feminist herself and actually agreeing with these guys, and even though she did see the more radical feminists as radical, it did not change her perspective. It didn't delegitimize their behavior so much, their choices. It simply made her react to an immediate situation. And I don't think I would give it as high a score as 6, because it does take away that they portrayed men as the problem preventing men's issues from getting addressed, where they didn't demonstrate that women are the same problem. They didn't demonstrate that there are systems in place that are part of the problem. They more or less glossed over the majority of what keeps those issues from getting addressed. And it strikes me that this show really did a pretty good job of covering its tracks. It did a pretty good job of slipping a narrative under the radar. And, if I was grading it in terms of attempting to get that done, then I'd give it an A. But as far as from a perspective of accuracy and helpfulness, no, not at all.
All right, Hannah, thank you. Alison?
Okay, well, I think that, it certainly isn't something a men's rights activist would write, and it isn't something a feminist would write. I'm not quite sure what agenda they're trying to slip through, but I do not think that feminists would write this. And like I said, it's obvious that men's rights activists wouldn't write this. So I'd have to ponder what kind of agenda. Possibly just an agenda of they have issues, but let's not who cares, right? And anybody who addresses them is an idiot or an asshole. I would say that
unless the right people address it, like Brennan herself.
I would say that the whole story arc of Brennan saying that she's a feminist in the beginning, and saying she's a card-carrying feminist of this organization, and then discovering how radical and unlikable and dangerous that organization was, was something that you don't normally see on television. And I would say that was very, very, and very interesting. I have no clue what the agenda was with showing that. It was that she would identify with men's issues, but essentially be a card-carrying feminist from an organization that she ostensibly thought was not radical and said was not radical. And that at the end, she had to actually be in opposition to and find out that it was actually more radical than she thought. Which, that was really interesting. I agree that I'm not sure if I would call it an agenda. Hannah's just put up in the chat, men have issues, but shame on men for bringing them up and responding with any level of emotion. That is just general, I think, what we would term gynocentrism. This idea that women are the center of society and their emotional reactions are the ones that need to be catered to. And if you're listening and you have an argument with that, put the argument in the comment and I'll give you my evidence. I won't give it now because it's supposed to be a summary. And then 2, men are the problem and women are wise. Those are tropes. Those are just endemic.
They might be tropes, but that is the portrayal that the reason for portraying them in this instance. That is a narrative. I mean, that is a narrative that has been put forth on Reddit by feminists over and over again. It's a narrative that's been put forth in arguments on Twitter over and over again, that men are the thing that are keeping men's issues from being addressed. That you can't have wisdom if you're a man. And being angry at men's issues existing, being angry that boys are getting raped in juvenile detention centers is wrong and an overreaction and demonstrates that you're aggressive and dangerous if you're male. And this is just more of that. I don't believe that this is innocent.
Okay, well, regardless, I'm not sure if I can see that whatever agenda it's pushing. Personally, I see that so much in all media that I could just see them as doing this completely unconsciously. But regardless, I think that I don't know what grade to give it. I think ultimately it's they have a more sympathetic almost portrayal. I don't even want to call it sympathetic, but a more not totally insanely freakishly parodying portrayal of men's rights activists versus Gamergaters, because Gamergaters were portrayed as rapists, kidnappers, and murderers. The men's rights activists were portrayed as chauvinists and bullhorn users.
And stalkers.
And stalkers, but then the feminists were also portrayed much more badly in this than they were in, for example, SUV.
Well, there was a comedy show that we reviewed also. I can't remember what it was called, but the men's rights activists in that were portrayed as whiny and inept.
Oh, you're talking about the Saturday Night Live skit?
Yeah. No, was it a Saturday Night Live skit? I thought it was a half-hour show that had a plot to it. There was a husband and a wife.
Where they had a dinner party, and there were these other women there, and the wife was she was being played by
There's a political campaign.
Yeah, no,
it's been a while.
It was Saturday Night Live.
There were Saturday Night Live actors in it, but it was, God, I can't.
No, it was Saturday Night Live.
It was freaking.
No. That was the Saturday Night. You're thinking of the Saturday Night Live sketch with the guy with the
Latino
wife.
Lena Dunham.
Didn't he import her? I can't remember the term.
It was when Lena Dunham was on the show as a guest.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
This was a they had a house and they weren't at somebody's apartment. There was a political campaign and there were men's rights protesters against the husband was campaigning for something and the wife was supporting his campaign and men's rights activists showed up, or it might have been the other way around.
Oh, that's a show, I think at Parks and Recreation.
Yes, that's it, Parks and Recreation. And they were portrayed as whiny and inept, and they sort of put a little bit of that into this as well. Okay.
Well, anyway, so I think it's a better portrayal than what they did with Gamergate, but it's not I would have to say with Karen's thing that she created, her impromptu scale with the SUV Gamergate at the bottom, portraying Gamergaters as murderers, kidnappers, and rapists. And you know, I don't know. I guess maybe Zootopia at the top, in my opinion.
It's SVU.
SVU. Okay, so SVU at bottom, and maybe Zootopia at the top. I don't know. I guess there would be a theoretical top over Zootopia, so maybe we put Zootopia at 5. I would put this at maybe 2.
Okay. One other thing I want to throw in there is the reason that this video came to my attention in the first place was actually because there was an article written on a feminist website about the episode, and they were pissed. And they did not like the fact that it was actually bringing up the fact that, you know, they didn't like it because they felt that it was legitimizing the MRM too much, and it was going really, really easy on them. So feminists probably hate this episode more than we do.
And it was portraying feminists as radical and violent and, you know, and vandals and, you know, angry and aggressive and criminals and all of that. They essentially criticized the show for legitimating men's rights issues, and then also for delegitimizing the good work of feminists by portraying a mainstream feminist organization as, you know, hugely radical and engaging in violence. So, yeah, no, like, feminists fucking hated it.
Well, and it's funny because the group that was portrayed was obviously supposed to be a representation of the National Organization for Women in the United States, and there are many, many feminists that if you get into a debate with them on social media will tell you those aren't real feminists. They're radical feminists.
Yeah, it was a BuzzFeed article, by the way, that did it. It was called Bones MRAs have just legitimized men's rights activists, or they just defended them, and they were especially upset that the Brennan character had done it. But I think that this episode's gone on long enough, so we're not going to go all into the article. But rest assured that the BuzzFeed feminists and the people that were commenting, they were really, really plenty butthurt that this episode even existed. So even when you consider the degree to which the way that the Meninists in the episode were portrayed as, you were saying, like, sort of misogynist, assholes, and that apparently deserve to be punched for their opinions, that was still not slanderous enough for the feminists online. So, and they did not like the fact that they were giving any level of legitimacy to their issues or to them as just being on the show at all.
That's kind of to be expected from feminists, though. They really don't, they'll get mad if you humanize men too much in a portrayal. You know, at least if you do it without a feminist narrative.
Mike, were you about to pipe up?
I just went, hey, so should I watch it? Just in that creepy way to say, hey, I've been here for an hour.